Thank you, everybody, for being here. Appreciate it. Can we please get a roll call?
Trustee Rubin.
Yeah.
Trustee Hallwag. Here. Trustee Mealopoulos.
Here.
All right, all here. Excellent. And with that, I'm looking around. Public comment time. If anybody has a comment they'd like to make. Seeing and hearing none, we will move on the agenda. So consideration of the minutes from last month. Anybody have any comments or? Actually, I guess I need a motion first. To the minutes.
Second.
Any comment? Not, then all those in favor? Aye. Okay, motion approved. Minutes are approved. And with that, if you could please lead us through the financials for the month.
Yeah, okay. All right, so for this evening's agenda, included in the packet is the August financial report. Once we go through the highlights of the report, we have a few CIP updates to share. And we will be officially kicking off the process for the forecast. Yay.
We should have gotten ready.
Would have been a good statement.
No,
We'll get there. We'll save that for the budget meeting.
we just.
Yes. This was a good month for property taxes. Second installment bills were due on August 1st. And accordingly, we received $2.5 million in revenue in August. Our revenue is sitting at 102% of budget. The reason why it's over budget is because we also receive that extra, those extra dollars that are for property tax refunds that were issued as a result of appeals that happened throughout the year. So that law changed, I think, 2 or 3 years ago, where now Cook County will aggregate all of those dollars that are deducted from us, and they will give it back to us the following year. So we don't budget for those because we typically don't know how much it's going to be. On a sales tax basis, we're still seeing sales taxes running low. They're less than last year and monthly budget. This will be for May sales. We're only at about 58% of budget. We are analyzing some of the sales tax data. We've had some staff changes in the finance department, so we had to get them authorized to view that information. We're still seeing those non-recurring sales that happened last year that didn't happen this year that are impacting the year-over-year comparison. We're also seeing auto sales trending down.
And that's the biggest
On
driver.
a high level. That's probably the biggest driver. But we're working to drill down to see what else is involved. It is tricky because now with the change in sales tax law, there are sales tax charged on online purchases that are delivered to Glencoe. So the online retailers will vary widely month to month, depending on what people are ordering online.
But net, our numbers, and granted, probably a big chunk of it's auto sales and the fact that I think in general, people just saw that and they bought a lot of stuff, you know, and then they're like, you don't need to keep doing that. We're spending our money travel, entertainment, things like that. We're seeing the effect of that sales tax number. But our new normal may just be about 10-ish% less than what it has been. Is that a fair statement?
That's a fair statement. I think we enjoyed some high revenues related to COVID. And we're seeing that trail off, and to your point, money's being redirected elsewhere. So this trend is going to be, we'll talk about it in a moment when we get to the forecast, but this trend's going to be rolled into the budget because we're just not seeing what we were hoping. On a bright side, our places for eating, income tax, parking fees, and building permits are all higher than last year and monthly budget. Our expenditures are running higher than last year, but they're only at 61.4% of budget. Some of that's timing. We're still seeing some capital projects that will be starting up this fall. So we will see that number come up, but I would anticipate that our expenditures are going to end shy of our budgetary target. On the water fund side, volumetric revenue is less than last year. It's at 55.8% of budget. It's down about 164,000. We still have some summer usage that will be billed, so it's a little early to be in a panic mode for this. And certainly the drought-like conditions that have happened recently will be helping this number quite a bit. Our fixed charge revenue is higher than last year. It's at 66.4% of budget. It's about $18,000 higher, pretty much on target where we would expect to be. And our expenditures are less than last year, at about 50% of budget and down about 1.2 million. We are moving forward with our water main project so that those dollars will quickly accumulate. And I will turn it over to Stella for a moment.
Thank you. So we did have a good month in August, despite being closed for 2 days due to the storm. Our revenues were 15% over budget, and our rounds also exceeded budget by 640. Year to date, we're 5,500 rounds over budget. Storm impact, I think we're going to get into a little bit later, just briefly. Microburst, 30 trees lost, 2 days closed. More to come. High school participation. We're a magnet for every high school in the area. We had tryouts for Evanston, New Trier, Loyola, Niles, and school in Highland Park and North Shore Country Day. And the winter boosters are just starting up with us. That's it.
On our other funds, our debt service fund, there's not much to write home about. It's just accumulating property taxes for our December principal and interest payments. We are starting to see expenditures pick up in the capital fund, primarily the South Green Bay Stormwater Project. That is one of the largest projects we have going this year. And then with the MFT fund, speed feedback signs and street study expenses are accumulating in that fund. We'll talk about in a moment. There's a slight change in that timeline. We are starting to see expenditures pick up in those two funds. From a personnel standpoint, we are running higher than last year by quite a bit. Big difference being in full-time salaries, filling vacancies there, and still running a little bit higher on our overtime, but not quite as high as what we have seen previously. So we are starting to see the benefit of filling those full-time.
Isn't that overtime number supposed to get more in line?
Which
With
one?
the large increase in.
It
Yeah,
should
but
over
it's-
time.
Yeah,
It's not an immediate hit because of training and the time that takes. So as you've been seeing us reporting out, we've got a number of folks who are in fire academy,
And seen some graduates and stuff.
police academy, and paramedic school. So that all requires some backfilling. So you're going to see some overtime relative to that.
And depending on what happens, we're down to 4 vacancies now. If we fill them with lateral transfers or brand new hires, that will determine how long our overtime continues to stay high. And then one other thing I'd like to note is just the pension cost. That expenditure ties directly to the property taxes. As we bring that money in, with the bills are paid, we also expense that to the pension fund. We transfer the dollars over. It is significantly higher at this point in the year compared to last year. If you remember last year, we did have to advance the pension fund money because the county was so late. So even though it's much higher, this is a good position to be in. When we move to projections, when we look at just our annual projections, revenue performance only, the general fund is running over $1 million higher than budget. If everything happens the way I hope it will, we will have a revenue surplus. When we back out the $700,000 in grant funding that belongs in last year, we run about $411,000 higher than what we anticipated budgetary wise. Water fund is running about $23,000 higher than budget, despite our low volumetric revenues. When we add expenditures into that equation, the general fund is planning to draw or projecting to draw down just over 530,000. We had a planned drawdown of 3.1 million. When we back out that grant funding, we'll be just shy of $1 million drawing down on the general fund. That could change depending on where our capital projects end between September and December. But we are running better than budget. The water fund is projected to draw down 1.3 million. That had a planned drawdown of 2 million. So again, we'll see where the water main project comes in. Fund reserves at the month end unaudited, our general fund sitting just over $19 million at 77.6% of operating expenditures. The water fund's at 6.6 and 121% of operating expenditures, but again, the lion's share of that is FOC proceeds waiting to be spent. From an inflationary impact, CPI for August was 2.5. Which is a good news story for us to get. And the Feds just cut rates. So that's a significant. Phil and I both had a little party in the office yesterday when we heard that. That is a good news story, especially as we continue to borrow. That should lower the rates going forward. Our commodities are still running higher than last year. They're at 63% of budget. And our contractual services are more than last year as well at 59% of budget. Since none of that is good news, I wanted to end on a high note.
Our services leveling off.
They're starting to level off. Depends on where.
Yeah.
Depends on what it is. But we aren't seeing, I don't want to use the word price gouging, but there was some,
Rapid.
I think,
upward
Rapid.
going.
yeah, I think there
starting
was.
slow.
It was a challenge for some of these, in these contractual environments, for some of them to get people, which we saw push up some of those rates. I don't want to say they were artificially pushed up, because I do think they were actually seeing increased employment costs for bringing certain.
Their energy, their insurance for their trucks, everything.
Yeah. So, but I do think, based off of what we've started to see with some of the contracts, that it's at least plateauing.
And those, what we're seeing now, our departments are all working on their budgets. They're due tomorrow, actually. So we will have a better idea of what we're projecting going forward in the coming days. But they are using our experience, our real life experience right now to project going forward. One good news item that I wanted to share with the committee is that we received news today that we received a $10,000 grant to reimburse us for body camera expenses from our insurance company. So we're very happy to be able to offset the cost of that. So not quite the full cost, but something.
We'll take it.
Yeah, we'll take it. Anything on your report? Moving into the CIP update, that starts on page 48. Couple items that will be on village board approval for tonight. There is going to be a change order in the water main improvement design project for 24-26, a change order for our snowplow replacement truck number 20, and then a rejection of bids for Park Avenue storm sewer outfall. As you probably saw from the village board agenda, those bids came in a little bit higher than what we were anticipating, so now we're gonna regroup and I was trying to be kind.
Well, that's a good example when you're talking about the inflation, et cetera.
Right.
The engineers, not that far off. But
Well, and
they
it's,
weren't anticipating that count.
sometimes it's timing, sometimes it's what else do they have that they're
Exactly.
doing? How can they fit it into something that they're doing, or can they?
Right.
But yeah, you see the range of those bid prices.
It wasn't a big enough project.
No, that's right. We're gonna try to roll it into something bigger next year.
And it wasn't as critical, which is why we can buy
Yeah.
some time a
Right.
little later. That's also a key point.
That being said, projects with updated timelines are electronic speed monitoring and crosswalk improvements. That timeline is changing to October from September. There are two other items on the agenda tonight that are not on the CIP program. A public works utility truck that was not included in the CIP report because this is one of the logistics issues that we had in 23 that led over into 24. And also the terrace court outfall engineering that was not originally planned, but it was included in kind of our estimate of engineering. Didn't quite make it to the capital plan. But we are trying to advance engineer some of these projects, which is a good trend.
And the change order on the public works truck is very small, but it's just a matter of adjusting, so it's $3,300 difference. What was proposed.
Okay, rolling right along. Okay, so starting on page 53 in the budget are the financial forecast assumptions. So you may remember from last year, we prepare a very large, very long financial forecast plan. And before we embark on that mission, we start out with just kind of our overall assumptions and themes. Looking for feedback from all of you today of these are the things that we're thinking about, but certainly if there's anything we've missed, I'd be looking for some input on that. So it'll be a 5-year forecast from 25 through 29. The assumptions are based off of current economic conditions that we're seeing, the financial policies that we talked about last month, state, federal, county regulations that have either changed or that we are anticipating changing. And then also other known impacts, increasing costs for capital and operations, wage inflation, and then maintaining that balance with our fund balance policy. On the revenue side, property taxes are expected to rise by 3.4%. The Illinois Department of Revenue sets this rate. It's based off of the increase in CPI from December to December. So this would be December 22 through December 23. We're still reviewing the number that was put in the financial forecast assumptions because we're determining estimates for new growth, which would allow us to go a little bit beyond that number. The water fees are adjusted from the rate study. This could be changed depending on where we fall with the final CIP. As I mentioned, the departments are working on their budgets. They're due tomorrow, and that includes all of the capital requests. The rate study is recommending a 6% rise in 2025. Again, we'll review that in context with the capital just to make sure we are where we are supposed to be. We're also going to be doing a rate study, but we postponed that in terms of just prioritizing the CIP first, because it doesn't make sense to do a rate study if we haven't finalized the CIP. And we're just looking at a different outlook at some of the timing of the water projects. I know we've discussed at these meetings in the past of trying to prioritize capital improvements when we are replacing a road to try and also replace the water main, the sewer main, everything at the same time. So that may change the way that the CIP looks in the fields as well. Sewer fees are proposed to increase to support capital improvements. So we're trying again to try and match that to the 10-year CIP. And as we discussed, sales tax are leveling off. So next year's estimate is being adjusted for that level off. Moving on to state shared revenues. So we've adjusted projections based on our latest estimates from the Illinois Municipal League. They do a study every year of state shared revenues to give local municipalities projections of what we can expect into 2025. We're still looking at these numbers to see if they make sense and with what we have been seeing, but they've given us estimates on income tax, use tax, motor fuel tax, personal property replacement tax. The PPRT is going to continue to take a hit because of the error that the Illinois Department of Revenue made for the last 2 years prior to 2024. They're still trying to recoup those dollars. So we're still seeing a steep decline in those numbers, which will impact not only us, but the library as well. Building permits in the forecast assume status quo. We have included a few new construction permits in the estimate, just anticipating the Forest Edge subdivision continuing development there. Certainly not expecting the whole subdivision, but a few homes at a time. Parking fees continue to rebound. We are almost back to pre-COVID numbers, as I'm sure all of you see every time you try to find a parking spot downtown.
What about the train station?
The train station's doing well. And I can tell you anecdotally from parking in the commuter line, it's usually pretty full, so. But we
We
are
have
starting to see
expanded a bit of our capacity as well, again, adding back in a number of spaces at the north end of Old Green Bay Road that had been kind of converted to regular daytime parking for Duke Park and other things. So I think we added 25 spaces back in, which was important when we took 32 spaces out of circulation in this parking lot. So, but yeah, it is full Tuesday through Thursday. Everything is full Tuesday through Thursday.
So we're not quite back to full strength, but we're pretty close. So we will roll that, continuing to assume that that will continue. The vehicle sticker program assumes status quo. We have a team of staff that are looking at the virtual program for next year. So that will be generally, and you'll hear more about this during the budget process, rolled out in phases, where next year we will take the program virtual with some of the equipment that we have today. And then we'll be enhancing to allow for better enforcement with the new program included in the budget.
Parking fees is it for citations, like, what do you mean by parking fees? That's a great question.
So what I mean by parking fees are daily.
That's a good
Daily parking fees for commuters or permits.
Oh,
Yes,
permit
yes.
fees, including that.
Yes. So parking, yes, parking tickets would be a different line item, yeah. Good question.
I know I've asked this before, but the state of Illinois can't provide us with a list of people to whom they've issued licenses, license plate tags or license plates.
They can. So that's one of the things that we're looking at with our existing vendor. So what we'll likely do is use our existing vendor in the coming year, and they can help connect us with Secretary of State data. We have to fill out a cybersecurity survey that basically proves to the state of Illinois that we are up to snuff to take their data. So we're in that process right now. It's not surprisingly a complex process, but how it will eventually work is that data will come to us. We have to scrub it with the data that we have to make sure it's accurate. And then there'll be a comparison in the system between who's purchased their vehicle sticker and who hasn't, and you essentially come out with a scofflaw list.
Right.
And that is loaded into the license plate readers on the CSO vehicles, and that's how they'll do enforcement.
Can't we, once they're past date, can't we just send them a bill?
Could do that too.
And why wait till the car's in town?
You could do that too.
We can.
You're playing with software.
We can work through with the board any level of strictness of enforcement. I will say that is a far stricter level of enforcement than we've ever done before. So it's just it's really a question of, how far we want to go. But I think we have the capability of doing that.
Are we actually afraid people will get mad because that they've been getting away with not buying a sticker and now they have to buy a sticker?
They will get mad, yes.
Good.
They will
Let them
likely
get
get
mad.
mad.
Yeah.
They can get mad at me.
We'll get flak jackets for the front step.
This is slightly off.
I can explain it to my wolf.
As far as we're talking about the stickers or not having stickers,
Because that's a big thing.
is Chicago gonna go virtual or are they gonna require stickers?
They would still require stickers. So one of the things we've talked about is typically in December, we would buy stickers for next year. We were planning on buying a bulk order of stickers without expiration dates,
Right,
where people can
Because-
come in and get those
because
volunteers.
when, because you're at risk in
Yes.
other jurisdictions if you have no sticker. So.
Yeah, we would have those available.
Good.
Yes.
Yeah, and as long as we're sending out bills for those that don't, I mean, they're happy to give you a piece of plastic.
And that would be voluntary. Anyone would be
Yeah.
welcome to do it. And like I said, they wouldn't have expiration dates on it, so we would just have that stock available.
Because if I remember correctly, it's a material amount every year. The theoretical number that we should be getting versus the
It's not in
It
number.
is.
yeah, it's a
It's
real
not-
number. I
There's
mean, it's
definitely folks that
a
have
little-
never bought
yeah.
them.
We're probably in a $50,000 range of uncollected.
Yeah, so if we spend a little money up front and we get a $50,000 a year revenue stream,
And I don't know if we would be able to issue a citation through the mail, but we could certainly do a late notice to say,
Yeah.
hey, you know,
So
you
the-
haven't bought this.
I think most people, they get a
Double
bill.
after a certain date, or
does,
it does
yeah.
automatically.
Yeah, after,
For like
did you,
10
I
hours.
forget what
I missed
when the
your
price
question.
doubles,
Oh, it does automatically May
First, May 1st. May 1st, right?
Mhm.
It's due May 1st, right?
Yes.
Mhm.
So we could even send something, at least the first time around, to figure out something to sort of give them notice or change when the price doubles or something so that we're not obnoxious about it.
Sure.
But, okay, you're late, you didn't pay.
Well,
You've
and
got
we can,
30 days, otherwise the
we
price
can begin
doubles.
to seed the ground beforehand, saying we're just taking a different approach on enforcement in this year. We are moving to a virtual sticker program, which should make it easier for you. But if you don't, you run the risk of being cited at any point, so.
And this may be the year because for as long as I've been here, we've never sent a reminder notice, but this would be a good year to send a reminder notice, especially because there's not physical stickers. It would be.
Yeah.
I mean, the other piece of this, and we don't often talk about it, but the fulfillment process is substantially expensive. And so there's also a value add back into the process where we are not spending to mail out stickers and fulfill those orders that are placed online and such. So it's I think there's an incentive certainly for us to continue to work toward a perhaps higher level of enforcement.
Can we notify people electronically, not just by mail?
We probably can do both, yeah.
I mean, you know,
For those that we have electronic contact information. Yeah. Surprisingly, we don't have electronic contact information for everyone.
so we should figure out how to, you know, the extent to which we should do that. I mean, we don't
Yep.
want a big brother, but on the other hand, that's the way people get information.
And that may be something that we could require when they pay online.
Yeah.
Is to provide us with that, so at least we can get that.
Similarly, but we have a alarm renewal fees and then a pet renewal. I mean, can we
Yes.
Do something similar for those types of.
Yes, and the pet renewals, we have to talk through the logistics of that because we basically issue permanent tags. So you only get a pet tag once, unless it's really bad shape, and we will let people get a new one. But that might be something we fulfill here. So we'll have to work through the logistics of that because we'll likely still use a lockbox just for the volume of payments that we receive at once. But that is something that we can look at. And alarm permitting, you have a good memory. We are looking at a different software for that, because there's a different way to do it. The ERP system that we have does have the ability to email, so we do send bills that way when people can have that information on file as well. And sometimes when folks pay online, even if it's only a one-time payment, we also have the ability to go grab that email. So then we can get that contact information. Another good way to remind folks. Anything else on these? Okay, so you'll hear
No.
more about that in the budget process.
Thank you. Sorry to derail.
No, that was some questions. Okay, switching to the expenditure side of, the equation. We've already talked about contractual and commodity costs on the rise. We did talk briefly about the pension costs. The police pension contribution alone is going up by over $400,000. So that's programmed into the budget. That's primarily due to our census data. We're filling vacant positions. We've had kind of a sweetheart deal for a few years. Now we're getting back up to where we should be. The IMRF preliminary rate is at 7.6%. Right now, we're at 7.1. In the whole scheme of the budget, that's a very modest, moderate number, but that is going up as well. The community grant program, I did not put a dollar amount in there, pending that community grant committee meeting. So we just have a placeholder in the budget for right now. Capital we'll be meeting on in a few weeks internally as staff. We'll have more information about that. As far as debt service, right now, our 10-year CIP includes issues in 26, 27, and 29. I would caveat that for now. A lot of things can change that. But ultimately, what's going to determine is what we see in the CIP requests and priorities.
A quick point to make, I think next year is going to be a smaller CIP year than perhaps we've seen in the last few. We've had really robust CIP years the last 4. I would caveat that to say, I think the majority of spending next year will be on the clubhouse project, so it still may be a larger CIP overall. But Public Works is going to be spending a lot of time in the data gathering mode next year, so that's going to be a pretty substantial effort that we've been talking about for a bit, wanting to create a better data set so that as Public Works is working on our CIP planning, we are layering those projects with one another, streets, water, or both sanitary and storm, along with one another. So we're going to be building out that data set next year. And the other point from a debt service standpoint is we are making 0 assumptions relative to any home rule changes. The budget that will be presented to you in November will be as though there was not a referendum question. So if there are changes that ever are made or not, as the case may be, that will be next year. This budget will be presented really kind of with status quo authority.
Sorry, to just follow up. If home rule passes, I don't think we would have to wait a year to do anything, to implement anything.
You would not.
So we could make budgetary
incremental
changes, assuming
Yeah.
they were smart, the board agreed, et cetera.
Right.
I just point that out when you said wait till the following year, maybe not.
Yeah, all I mean is we are not presenting to you
Right.
anything that would be augmented or not based off of whether the village had home rule authority or did not.
Glad you brought up the golf course because I'm still optimistic that we may be borrowing this year.
Yeah.
But if that doesn't happen, we would borrow early next year, and that would modify our plan, obviously.
Yeah.
In 25.
And we would likely issue the entirety of the remaining authority of 12 million, so.
Only good thing, well, costs keep going up and up faster than interest rates go down, but interest rates will be going down.
Yeah.
So a little bit of an upside.
Agreed.
Moving on to personnel costs, salaries are still under review, including personnel costs for full-time and part-time. So you'll see that in the financial forecast assumptions, those numbers are red and bold. From a collective bargaining standpoint, our public safety union has an active CBA. They already have a 4% increase that we've agreed upon for next year. The public works union contract expires on December 31st. We just received the notice to bargain, so we're hopeful that our negotiations will begin soon. We'll have a number there shortly. On the non-union side, right now, I think I have a CPI holder in the financial forecast assumptions, but we're looking at comp levels. We will obviously come back to the board with feedback on where you'd like that to go. The forecast itself does include an attrition factor, which is what we've been seeing, a lot of turnover, just a sign of the times. And then overtime accounts for current vacancies, filling authorized positions, and understanding that maybe training costs associated with that. And obviously it's subject to seasonal events and the vacancies that we're seeing. Moving into the forecast assumptions itself, a lot of the assumptions we've discussed at prior meetings. And these would all be incorporated into the budget. Obviously, we're seeing increased energy, natural gas prices. We talked about public safety consolidation, where we've seen some savings in the investment portfolio, but as they are beginning to actively manage those assets, we're starting to see that we're anticipating seeing those savings kind of erode a little bit. Also not listed on this slide, is that Phil and I are watching proposed bills on modifications to tier 2 pension systems that was introduced this year and it died. I don't think it was died in committee, died in the House.
Yeah, they killed it in committee, but that
It's
doesn't mean it
going to
won't
come
come
back. So that's something that we are going to just keep an eye on and
they did indicate that there may not be a veto session this year, which is not all bad because you won't necessarily get surprised by unexpected legislation. So we're still monitoring that with the Northwest Municipal Conference, but it's possible there won't be a veto session in November, which means we wait until January for them to reconvene. Again, there's some value in Springfield not being in session.
Yeah.
So.
That being said, the governor has indicated the indication they've passed to eliminate the grocery tax. So that is something that we'll see in the forecast, not in next year's budget, but in 2026, that we may need to account for. That's one of those things that we would be talking about for the 26 budget later next year. If the village were to enact any type of sales tax or grocery tax, we would have to pass that before October 1st for it to go into effect January 1 of 26, if we didn't want to see any change in our revenue stream. So we do have some time.
And it is in place through 2025, so
Yes.
that's why, and Nikki said, we're not making any adjustments for next year because we expect that will just remain as typical.
So there's always chances for the state of Illinois to make more changes in their budget, so that will be something we continue to watch. We do have some assumptions rolled into the forecast for that. We did talk about PPRT, and a little bit about inflation. We are also monitoring for debt. The forecast includes the debt that was listed up on the slide. So as you look at the expenditures and debt, those have those principal payments programmed into it.
One other state dollar figure that we spend a lot of time talking about, and Nikki and I were just on the legislative committee meeting yesterday talking again a great deal about it, is the local government distributive fund. Springfield is a completely new place from the standpoint of the people who are in the legislature versus the people who were in the legislature when LGDF changed in 2011. Meaning there is no institutional memory or very little institutional memory as to what life was like when LGDF was at the constitutional level of 10%. So it remains at 6.54%. It did bump up ever so slightly in the current state budget. Municipal Conference is working with the Illinois Municipal League to restructure some of our approach relative to continuing to lobby state legislators on reinstating LGDF, perhaps doing so over time so that the state can ease into it. I will tell you, generally, that has not been something that this governor has had any interest in doing, nor his predecessor. And so I think the state has gotten very comfortable with that additional revenue that used to be passed through to us. And so that's just something we're going to continue to monitor and be mindful of. So just something as we continue to watch what happens in Springfield.
So in the real world, the pension stuff is more frightening than the possibility of getting our 3.5% back. would be good. So when we meet with our legislators, I mean, I just poured gasoline in myself. I said, if you do this pension stuff, we're lighting it here. It's just, don't do it. And then we say, and by the way, please give us the 3.5%. But in terms of a target, holding off the pension stuff.
What's the pension issue?
Oh, well, it's a rollback of a number. So back, if we go back again to that same point of 2010, 11, there were substantial changes made at that time to break the pension system into two tiers. So, and a start date that kind of broke those two tiers apart. Right. And tier two had significant changes made to it. And some argue too significant of changes. I think those are overblown arguments in some ways. But what the state did at that time was change the LGDF distribution and lowered the overall pension costs by creating the second tier pensions.
Which was new people.
And
Just to be clear, under the Illinois Constitution, as interpreted by the Supreme Court, once somebody gets a pension, they have it forever. For life. You can't touch it.
you can't reduce the benefit.
So what the legislature did, and Illinois was famously being crushed by its pension cost because, boards like ours back in the old days would say, well, Fred or Sheila are going to be retiring soon. So let's bump their pay up for the last few years to help them out. And nobody thought.
Just for the record, that was happening less at the local government level than it was at other levels of government, but
it was
happening. Is accurate.
It was happening. And so, and it was permanent, state constitution, the deal they made when they did the Constitution in 1970, you can have an income tax and you have pensions can't be touched. So they fixed that with new employees, couldn't change it. People already there, but new employees, and new employees get a less generous deal. It's not a terrible deal, but it's a less generous deal. But the unions keep coming back, which, I get it. They keep coming back and saying, it's not generous enough. We should, make it more generous. And from our point of view, when we look at it, we say, you just tinker with one thing and that is permanent for everybody's lifetime.
Right.
And all of a sudden we're crushed again.
Right.
The tier two pension system was designed to cost local municipalities less. So it takes longer for folks to vest. It takes longer. You have to work longer in order to collect a pension. The beneficiary benefits are different. So it was designed to really kind of lower the normal cost of operating a pension. But now what the police and fire unions are claiming in Springfield is that it's making it more difficult for them to recruit the police and fire because they have people that are working next to each other that have different pension benefits. There's also a claim that tier two pension system does not meet the Social Security Safe Harbor Act, which actually has been debunked by several studies that have been done. But there are some state pension funds, not public safety ones, that don't meet the Safe Harbor Act, that do need to be fixed. So I think there's a lot of confusion with new legislators in Springfield of which pension system they should have a problem. And there's some opportunistic folks that are taking advantage of that. So.
And there is obviously a way, if you're really having problems hiring people, to change your current pay rate, which you have control over, absent the union contract, which gets renegotiated every few years, as opposed to let's incur a giant expense that we can never change and it lasts forever.
So going back to what I was saying at the beginning, the grand deal that was struck was we will give you pension reform. And in turn, you will receive less local government distributed fund resources. This was structured in such a way that everybody loses except the state. So when we continue to drumbeat on LGDF, there's a reason, because it was taken away for a specific purpose. And when that specific purpose is again being challenged or considered for change, no one's talking about LGDF. And so we're the ones that are on the hook for ensuring that we're funding those requirements that the state is enacting, but the state is not pushing resources back in our, back toward us that had been part of, again, that grant bucket. So there's a very good reason why both of them are very important. I wouldn't discount the LGDF as a legitimate legislative priority. It is perhaps in the long term not seen as nearly the same overall financial impact, but it does double down on that financial impact. So if the state is contemplating a tier 2 rollback without an LGDF roll up, then we are finding ourselves doubly hurt by that. So there's a reason all of these things are interconnected and tied together, but it speaks back to, I think 90% of the legislators in Springfield are different since 2010, when that was negotiated. There's a lot of storytelling and a lot of storytellers who are weaving those stories together. So remains something we're very focused on.
Yes. So whether veto session happens or not.
Mhm.
we're gonna be watching. I will take you through this next part fairly quickly. This is a condensed down version of the full forecast, moving from left to right. You can see we start with what we have year to date. This is as of August 31st. Compared to what we had budgeted for 24, and then we have our year-end projections of where we think we're going to end the year. So we use what we think our year-end projection is going to be to restart the budgeting, kind of reset the levels of what we're expecting going forward in 25, and then we modify based off of what we know or what we expect in 25. This is small on the screen, I apologize, but it is in the packet as well. Those numbers in red bold, we're still looking at pretty closely before we present a more finalized forecast to you. On the property tax levy, we're assuming a 3.4% increase. That's based off of what we're allowed under detail. And then you'll see that drop off in sales tax about $200,000 from where we had budgeted this year. I think we were not that optimistic based off of what we had in 23 and where we were trending, but we just didn't anticipate that drop off that happened this year. Income tax is continuing to perform strong, so that's a good sign. And utility tax, the downside of the expenditures for the village is that utility costs go up, but then you also have utility taxes going up as well, in tandem, so there's a little bit of offset. You can see the building permits going up there quite a bit.
One thing I would just note on that is we haven't really rolled in the Hoover Estate development. A couple,
A couple
but
each
we
year.
do expect that actually, I think that's a conversation we need to re-engage with you on. If you remember back in 19 and 20, we were talking about segregating those one-time resources in a way that we could make sure that we weren't counting on them in a regular sense. So that's another piece of this puzzle that we will re-engage with you guys on as we get closer into budget.
Yes, and our financial policies do allow for that. If we wanted to do like a one-time transfer, if we had a revenue surplus in building permits, we could transfer that into capital and use that for infrastructure. Let's see, other things. MFT has come down a little bit, but we're still looking at that estimate. Use tax is starting to level off, and we've talked a little bit about that as we've seen sales tax rise, use tax has come down. And then we're seeing parking rebound. And again, you can see that 14% drop in PPRT. That's the current forecast that we're going to see continued decline in that revenue until the Illinois Department of Revenue regains the revenue that they lost. On the water side, We talked a little bit about a 6% rate increase, so there's a placeholder in there for both volumetric and fixed rates. Our garbage service fee is typically tied to CPI unless we need to increase that more. As a reminder, that fee generally covers the cost of garbage collection, the impact on the streets. So it covers packing program, it covers our special recycling events, and a number of other public works budget items. So we do evaluate that every year to make sure we're covering our costs. On a sewer charge basis, we have a placeholder of 3% that may change with capital. We've talked quite a bit about vehicle licenses and alarm permits. We're hoping that that will rebound next year as we get our process underway.
I gotta say, when it comes to the sewer charges. Yeah, we should focus and make sure, considering what we're seeing for our substantially increased cost to put pipes in the ground. Which is theoretically what that's supposed to pertain to. I think we ought to look closely at that. That may be too low.
Yeah, that's the sanitary sewers that we're talking about as opposed to storm. And it is, I think that's a fair point for us.
They ain't new either.
No, I'm just saying, as we contemplate the work that we're gonna continue to do and the data collection that we're in the process of gathering relative to the condition assessment, the requirements of MWRD, all of those pieces and parts. So, yeah, we can look at.
And we have historically been the same sewer, like from what we have budgeted at sewer charges and what's actually coming in. So we do have to really look at that. And as we prepare that CIP, we'll take a look at that sewer line. I'm sure that we're projecting the revenue to cover it. That's a good point. That makes me too. On the expenditure side, as I mentioned, salaries and overtime are still under review. I'm optimistically have about $1 million there in overtime, hoping that that's going to level off a little bit. But considering we still have 4 vacancies, we're going to have to look at that number before it comes to you for final approval. We're talking commodities and services are both proposed to go up. We will adjust those numbers based off of what the departments are putting together. And right now that debt service line is based off of the current financing plan that we have. So any changes that we make in your CIP, we'll adjust that line item. And then, as I mentioned, the capital and the community grants just have a TBD for now. So in terms of next steps, we would be preparing the full financial forecast for you in October. That will set the tone for the budget discussion that we'll have in November, including any CIP recommendations and changes that we've made to these assumptions. And then I would just open it up for the community feedback if there's anything else you think we missed.
I thought that you missed something is kind of funny. You go,
Very, very.
Okay, I just wanted to, we didn't really mention anything about our, future water plan decisions.
Yes.
We're probably not ready in the next few years to have a substantial awareness of the overall cost. I think what we will likely be rolling into the CIP are engineering services relative to evaluating the options that are available to us. Monica and I were just talking about that this week. So that is something that you will see begin to make its way into the CIP. Major expenditures in any case is outside of the current CIP window, I would articulate. So I think we will begin to spend money and project spending money to get to a decision point in the next 5 years.
This is a good point for us to incorporate in the financial forecast because it may fall outside of the scope, but it is a large expenditure that would modify that.
Just to maybe ask, our sewer fees are based on the consumption of water.
Yes.
So I never understood why. I mean, most communities do it that way, but is there another way that we can collect sewer fees not related to consumption of water, so like necessarily.
Maybe issue because we have to be able to justify what we are charging fee wise. Because we do have a lot more flexibility at the home rule community. But it is something that I can look into and research if we would be.
I think we can look at it from the standpoint of sanitary. It is absolutely something that's different when we talk about home rule versus, or when we talk about home rule as it relates to storm. So we don't have a stormwater fee in this community, we can't, in our current form. So I do think there's a way for us to, again, circle back on the sanitary side and see. You're right, most of the time it's based off of consumption, it's kind of a weird.
Generally, the thought is if it's coming through the faucet, it's also going through the sewer.
Right.
But that's kind of the justification that's been used. But could there be another way to do that? And you could more directly tie it to the CIP to fund the structure, the capital infrastructure. There are a lot of communities that just put an infrastructure fee on their water bill. And it's directly tied to the 10-year CIP. So that might be a structure that.
Home rule.
Yeah, I was gonna say.
Excellent. Thank you, Steve.
What's the 30-second version of the debt service jump again? Does that include the golf course?
It does include the golf course,
Got it.
yes.
All right, anything else?
Can I, before we adjourn, I just want to mention, we had a conversation with trustee Hallwax about the October finance committee meeting date, possibly moving it from Tuesday to Wednesday. I think that may be better for you too, particularly if you're going to join virtually. So Georgia, I just wondered if that was something you could do. I believe it's the 16th. Yeah. Okay. We need both of you because he's probably going to be virtual. So,
No problem.
yeah,
Unless you want to have this done at North Western.
we could start it at a different time if that was easier for you, but,
Hey, that's not true. I should be home
Tuesday.
Tuesday.
Got it. But Wednesday I'm here, on Thursday.
Hey,
we're going to need committee of the whole in
To
October.
make it work.
Okay.
Time.
I will.
Might.
Yeah.
Yeah, let me, when I go back up, to look at my, I think I could do almost anything.
other rooms, no.
I just let me know.
We can do that upstairs. Yeah.
Now you can adjourn. All right, motion to adjourn, please. Second. All those in favor? Aye, we are adjourned and thank you all very much.